In this video, I'm going to show you how to perform 3 of my favorite hip stretches and mobility exercises to help improve your golf swing. If your hips are too tight, you're gonna be leaking power, probably gonna be leaking some efficiency as well. So if that's you and you need to work on that hip mobility, make sure you stay tuned. So before we get started with the hip mobility exercises and stretches, I want to give you a little bit of background on my golf experience. So I was formerly director of fitness and performance at a golf club called Baltusrol Golf Club in New Jersey, a very well-known top club in America. I believe they've held the most USGA majors in golf history. So very fortunate to work there. It was an amazing experience. Also, I was director of fitness at a full-time golf academy down in Florida, down here in Orlando, and it was with a former coach to Tiger Woods. So a lot of experience with the golf body, watching the golf swing, and hopefully I can show you some of my favorites in this video, for the hips at least. So before we get started, let's talk about why we need some good hip mobility in the golf swing. So obviously golf is a rotational sport and we need to have good rotation in our upper body and our lower body. So when we're in our golf stance, just like this, we get into a good hip hinge here. And then as we load up into our backswing, our trail hip on this side is in hip internal rotation. Opposite hip, lead hip, hip external rotation. So we have to get good rotation in our hip to turn. Most people struggle, especially amateurs, struggle with this hip internal rotation. It's probably the biggest limitation I see in the majority of people, not just golfers, just in general. So when we get into this position, if we're limited in our hips, again, there's tons of different golf styles and golf techniques and swing styles, but you're probably gonna compensate with either losing posture, maybe your club crosses the line at the top, something above the hips. It's going to kind of give, it's going to compensate. So as we go into impact, we start going into internal rotation in our lead hip, also external rotation in our trail hip. They just switch. Again, if we're struggling with that hip internal rotation at impact, things like thrusting at the ball is very common, and that's probably the most common thing, that early extension that people see. So kind of do one of these and kind of flip at it. So that's one of the other things when we're struggling with our hip internal rotation. And then also we just have to get good hip extension too. So kind of get that power here at impact. So if we struggle with our hip flexibility in our lead hip, then that's going to be a little bit difficult too. So now, after all that, let's get into the mobility exercises and stretches. First hip mobility exercise is going to be the 90-90 hip stretch. So we're going to attack hip external rotation and hip internal rotation at the same time. So front leg is 90 degrees, and then back leg is 90 degrees. This is a great stretch just overall for the hips, and it's very good for golf because, again, it's simulating our backswing. So right now, for a right-handed golfer, our front leg is hip external rotation, and our trail hip is in hip internal rotation. So this is what would be simulated for a right-handed golfer's backswing. A lot of people will struggle with actually being able to stay upright. And if that's the case, you can always lean back and place your hands on the ground for support, or we can pop something or pop our hip up with a pad under our lead hip. So that's going to make life a lot easier. So if you're struggling to sit upright and keep our back straight throughout the movement, this is going to be great. So from here, I like to place my hands right on the floor, chest up and out, so get nice straight back, and then just hinge forward, getting a good stretch on that lead hip. Just like this. We can hold this up to 30 seconds to a minute. And then what I like to do is turn my upper body to the back hip. Again, if this is super tight, place your hands behind the back on the floor, or you can bring the arms out in front. But maintain that good posture. Try not to hunch over when you're doing this position. If that's the case, place the pad underneath your butt, just like this. Again, 30 seconds to a minute. It's gonna be great. And then we also want to switch sides, but this is one of my favorite stretches for golfers because it simulates it almost perfectly. Let's go into our next one. Now let's get into a stretch called the tactical frog. It looks a little awkward to do, maybe not the best thing to do in the middle of the gym, or maybe if you're comfortable with it, but it's going to be great for, again, that hip internal rotation that most people struggle with. So to get set up, knees are going to be wide, and then feet on the floor. You can place your hands on the floor, or you can place your forearms on the floor, depending on how flexible you are. Now we're going to push our hips towards the floor, almost kind of like you're humping, and then from here you're going to bring one leg up towards the sky. This is hip internal rotation right here. We're going to sink back, get a good stretch in our groin, and then we're going to do the opposite side. Again, if you're pretty flexible, you can do it this way. Forearms down, hip to the floor, and then bring that up. It's an amazing movement, and if you start cramping up in that hip, which is a very common complaint that I get, just back off a little bit. Your body's just not used to that movement yet, so it's cramping up to protect it, but take a little time off, take a quick break, and then run right back into the exercise. So that's the tactical frog. Now let's go into our last hip stretch. So the last hip stretch we're going to do is we're going to attack that hip flexor, and we're going to do a classic hip flexor stretch, half kneeling, but then we're going to put a little spin on it too. So to get set up, one leg out in front, make sure we keep our back nice and straight, squeeze the glutes. That's going to pull our low back into a better position, a more neutral straight back position, just like this. And then we're going to shift forward. Should feel a good stretch in the quad and the hip. But now in this position, we have a good stretch. I want to add a little bit of strength to the movement, a little strengthener. So from this position, we're going to hold everything nice and tight, and then we're just going to lift our knee off the ground just for a quick second. Just like this, then drop it down. Good stretch here. Hold it, lift. Just like that. Try to prevent your lower back from arching. Again, a lot of things are going to try to compensate when we're doing this movement. So, butt tight, shift forward, good stretch, hold everything there, lift, and then bring it back down. If that's uncomfortable, just hang out in this position. That's totally fine until you get strong enough to do that movement. And that's going to be it for the 3 best hip stretches for the golf swing. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you can do a lot of these and eventually making sure your swing is just working great. Got that great hip rotation. So hopefully that helps out. And if you have any questions about any of these movements, why we're doing it, how to perform them correctly, or whatever issues you're having at home with these stretches, make sure you comment down below. Also, let me know what you want to see in the future for these golf videos. I have a ton of golf knowledge, including stuff for the swing, but I'm going to stay away from the swing stuff, more of the golf body for the swing. So stuff that will help your golf swing. And hopefully, yeah, hit that thumbs up button if you liked it, and then subscribe. More videos coming soon.